Welcome, everybody. This is Brian Lachlan with Intelice Solutions. We're very excited to be presenting Bigleaf Networks and Ryan Beer with us, as well as my partner and our president, Robert Roman, to talk a little bit more about the solution today. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and Robert.
Thank you, Brian. So I think first and foremost, when we look at what's happening in worldwide with, the remote workforce, the workforce moving to, meetings, remote meetings, meeting spaces being more online than in person, and more technologies being used to represent what used to be in-person communication. There's been a huge increase in the need on the networks and the performance of networks and the control of what goes over those networks. We've seen a number of issues with our customer environments as they adopt these new technologies and are trying to utilize these technologies where they don't really have a true control over the bandwidth they have and how it's used. And generally what we see happening is the recommendations to add more bandwidth, right? Increase your bandwidth or add secondary providers. And that doesn't really solve the problem. It adds to the complexity, and in some cases just gives them maybe some more fail safes if something fails, but doesn't really truly solve the issues that they're having. And looking to really find a solution for this, the industry's had a solution in software distributed wide area networks, or SDWAN solutions, for a while, but they've all been generally tied to an internet service provider or provider themselves, and have proved to be really less flexible than what we had desired for our customer base. And so we engaged with Bigleaf Networks. We came across them through some of our corporate memberships and vendor events, and really were intrigued and impressed with how they've designed their solution to be agnostic to the ISP, but also to provide a solution that gives that true control and gives that redundancy and true utilization across multiple internet service providers in a true, really high availability or true functional aspect of using the internet service lines to their entirety, and providing better value of those lines, in essence, only using what they need across all lines instead of having to have as much as they need across one line. So I'm going to hand it over to Ryan now so he can talk a little bit more on how Bigleaf does that and the benefits there. And I think you'll be impressed.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And appreciate the time, everyone, and listening to this today. So just feel free to chime in if you have any questions, and Robert, jump in if you want to add anything that we're going through. So I'll go ahead and jump in. So really, when you look at what we're doing from an SD-WAN standpoint, and kind of what Robert was just alluding to, really the goal there is to optimize the public internet for cloud applications that are being used now. And really, so much of business productivity running through the cloud to ensure an experience for users, that over the public internet has just been a very tough thing to achieve for many people who work in IT, or really just anybody who's trying to run a business and ensure performance for their users that work there every day or are working remote. So as many of these applications have moved out to the cloud, like your phone systems and your emails and general things that people are using every single day, what we do is give the ability to use multiple different redundant ISP connections, redundant carriers, together at the same time, so that we can automatically share traffic across those multiple different carriers. So if a circuit does start to have a problem, or you do have internet connectivity issues, the goal with having SD-WAN in place is that will no longer affect your applications that are there to run your business more efficiently. So we can monitor and detect network problems that are happening across multiple different providers. And before your traffic hits that issue on a network, we'll be able to detect that, move it around that problem, and everybody keeps working as there nothing even happens. So I'll talk about that, the how we do that a little bit more, but just wanted to talk about what we do a little bit here at the beginning. So the way we do that is we have our own SD-WAN technology that we provide, and we have our own patented technology that we've built and own and maintain, but really combining that with a little bit of artificial intelligence. I know it's kind of interesting to think about it. And what really that means from a user standpoint is that we're automating the WAN part of the network, the wide area network, where many of these circuit problems happen, but applications are running over these circuits. So it's kind of this catch-22 for so long of, hey, use all of these really cool cloud applications to run your business very efficiently, but be wary of the internet, because if the internet has a problem, then your applications are going to suffer. So it was always kind of this risk reward of, yeah, let's use cloud, but hopefully the internet works. So that's where we've kind of been able to bridge that gap to say, we can provide that reliable internet optimization experience for any cloud applications that are going to be used now or in the future. So it's a little bit of future proofing your network for things that are coming, but also the very common applications that are being used now, like, Salesforce, Ring Central, Azure services, Office 365, these very common applications that even, SMBs all the way to enterprise Fortune 500 customers are using now. So that's really what's kind of pushed the need for this kind of technology. And why this is important is because so many of these applications live in the cloud now, to where that's not just an enterprise solution using, or enterprise size customer using cloud applications. These are even more so now built for the SMB market, because that type of automation and being able to, kind of optimize that efficiency across multiple users and not having to host everything from one location is beautiful. It's just hard to do that over the public internet. So I wanted to make sure that that's understood of why that's important, and being able to have that direct, reliable access to the applications you're trying to use. So you can kind of, what I was alluding to here about why that is important, but everyone has dealt with the choppy VoIP calls, things that have happened over the public internet, where you're on a video Zoom call, or you're on a voice session, and it, starts to get garbled, or sounds like somebody's underwater, or the call just drops completely. And a lot of times why that's happening is not that a circuit has gone down completely. It's more of these brownout kind of degradation situations that we run into a lot of the times now over the public internet. So things like packet loss, latency, jitter, hard outages, these are the things that are happening over the public internet that are making your VPNs drop, your ERP system not work how it's supposed to. Your remote VPNs are dropping because they're the flapping back and forth and things like that. That happens all the time over the public internet. So being able to alleviate a lot of these issues by, when someone's on the phone and we can see that packet loss is on that connection, moving that phone call to the other internet connection while the person is on that phone call, and they don't even know that switchover is happening during the call. So being able to avoid those issues. Yeah.
Hey, Ryan. So that's, that goes both inbound and outbound too, right? So if, a customer's utilizing maybe a VPN solution for their remote access staff or workloads, those individuals coming in over those same lines can experience that same problem, right? They're connecting from a different internet provider, obviously, but they're crossing several different providers and backbones, and ultimately are coming over one of those lines today. With this solution, they're really coming over both of those lines, and that solution can dynamically shift them back and forth to ensure that their remote access experience is the best back into the corporate office and those resources as well.
Yep, that's exactly right. I'm jumping forward a little bit with this slide, but it was good while you were speaking, because this is showing that inbound and outbound traffic coming to and from your Bigleaf service for workers in the office or remote users, because now I'll get to this, but using one single Bigleaf public IP address. And that's kind of a tease of what I'm going to talk to in a second, but I'll just wanted to mention that too, because it's that inbound and outbound, what I like to call end-to-end control of that cloud traffic. So that anywhere on the public internet, it's not randomly getting hit by packet loss that we can't see. We will see that packet loss, move the call around it, or whatever application is being used. So I use calls and VoIP and stuff as my example all the time, because it's probably the most commonly used cloud application, but it's also the most sensitive cloud application that you can use in terms of any type of minor issue on a circuit, you can hear that on a VoIP call most of the time. So it's a good example of where we've kind of built our name in the space a little bit of being able to provide an experience for voice over the internet over very unreliable connections. So I'll jump back to this real quick. So, and I do like this slide discussing where the internet, the public internet, commodity cable circuits and DSL, wireless, low cost fiber really wasn't designed for these types of cloud applications that are out there today. So that's why like Robert said, for so long, anytime someone would call to talk about an internet issue that they were having, it might be a latency problem. The carrier would say, oh, well, let's give you more bandwidth. Always thinking that was going to fix the problem when really that wasn't the issue. It was just the circuit wasn't clean enough, for these sensitive applications. It had plenty of bandwidth. So just to understand there that bringing kind of this optimization to internet connections so they can reliably carry these types of sensitive applications. I'll leave this here just for a second for people to take a look at. And as so many carriers have different last mile and middle mile providers, there's just a million reasons why, there's circuit issues that happen and everybody's dealt with them. So it's, Bigleaf is not coming in to say, we're going to you're never going to have another internet problem. The internet is still going to have problems. What you're not going to have a problem with is your application performance, because we're going to see that internet problem route around that issue that's happening, and no one feels that issue that they're dealing with. So being alerted that these network problems are happening, but not feeling them while you're using your applications at your business.
Yeah, I think one thing to point out there, I mean, there are better types of internet service, right? Different types of connectivity lines, like you said, the last mile, whether you're using an enterprise class fiber line versus a business class cable line, or even a more limited wireless line, a 4G type of internet service provider. And this solution can handle all those with the understanding that, those different service lines need to be monitored and can be utilized differently for those needs and still adapt to that. So.
Yep, exactly. And adapting automatically, not requiring someone to go in and fail over a circuit after the issue has already happened, because at that point, the person's already felt the pain of that issue, being able to see that problem before and route around it. Yep. And
just to add to that, I mean, what very commonly I see two ISPs configured for an office site, but those ISPs are configured in a active failover model. But to really manage that active failover process, you really have to have a time delay or time sensitive component to monitoring and failing over, and then furthermore failing back. So normally a failover process can still result in a minute to two of downtime in just figuring out the line that's failed, determining that, okay, it's failed enough where we have to fail over to the secondary line. And then, oh yeah, now we failed over to the secondary line. The primary line came back. Now we need to fail back. So you have a multiple disruption process in an active failover model generally, because you're failing over to completely different service to different IP addresses, which are dependent on your address in the internet, right? So it always has to reestablish connectivity. This product, Bigleaf, mitigates all that for both the inbound and outbound traffic. So active configuration, there's no delays in failover because it's always active and it constantly is rerouting.
Yeah, and that active passive scenario that things used to be in, or many still are, but in that scenario, that was fine when it was just basic web browsing and things like that happening over the internet, where now all of your applications are running over the internet. Those have to be active. Those things have to be able to use both internet connections to the best of their ability, switching back and forth depending on how circuits are performing in real time. Those are just critical things now for these applications running over the public internet. So that's why I like what you just said, Robert, because it gives the ability to use a backup circuit now, not pay for a circuit to just sit there that you hope to never use. You know what I mean? So it's interesting now to actually be able to use all of that available connectivity that you have.
And if you think about that, you're generally paying more for more capacity than you need between the two lines, right? You have one line that's your primary, maybe that's 100 megs. You have a secondary line, maybe that's 50 megs because you accept that fall off for, that failover, and you don't want to pay too much for a line that's not going to be used. So you have 150 megs altogether, but in reality, you only need 100 or maybe even less. So you put in a solution like this, you may be able to reduce your commitments to those ISPs and get the total amount of bandwidth that you truly need over both lines. And that provides a real benefit there. I think one other factor there is getting IP addresses from the Bigleaf service is included. Most ISPs charge monthly fees for those IP addresses, depending on how many you need. And they're not insignificant costs. And so putting in a solution like this can be a net change of a very little amount to have a much better overall service.
Yeah, being separate from the carriers is kind of the sweet spot for us, because we're issuing those IP addresses separate, which is obviously a technical benefit, but it also frees up a little bit of the handcuffing from carriers to where you can really add and remove ISPs, as much as you need to now, depending on, if you get a good deal 1 year or something like that, or you're out of contract, and not having to worry about re-IPing your whole network every time you change the internet provider. So all you're doing is changing your WAN port on your Bigleaf router, or the Intelice team doing that and plugging in your new circuit, and it's ready to go. So making it very easy to change out backup or primary internet connections if you want to. One thing I wanted to point out on here, which I'm going to get into the how it works real quick, but these are just a good high level bullet points of what we're providing. So resilient connectivity, for applications provided over the public internet, instant kind of automated adaptability. So instead of requiring a static policy for each application, we're dynamically adapting to how those circuits are performing in real time. So if a cable circuit's performing great and it can handle your Office 365 traffic, great, be able to put it down that circuit, and vice versa. So, and then your visibility and insights into your Bigleaf dashboard with the Intelice team to be able to monitor how your network is performing and bandwidth utilization, circuit performance, things like that. So that was a little bit of a long-winded way to talk about kind of what, the why and a little bit of the what we do. I'm going to talk about a little bit more of technical of how we do these things, but making it kind of understandable and wrapping it all up with what we just did. So I showed this slide earlier. I do like this diagram because it's showing where the Bigleaf router actually sits in the network. So where we sit on the WAN side or the outside of the firewall that's currently in place. And our router is completely transparent to your firewall, meaning no security policy changes to implement this service. So the firewall sees Bigleaf really as the same as it would an internet connection from a security standpoint. So just understanding that we're not requiring security policy changes in your security to add SD-WAN on the WAN side of your firewall.
So the big change here for most of our clients would be, instead of the ISPs, service lines terminating into their modems, and then those modems being handed off to the firewall, the ISP's services and modems would connect directly to the Bigleaf router, and there'd be one single connection from the firewall to the router.
Exactly right. Yep. And we have 4 WAN ports on the router, so up to 4 internet connections of any type. And when we're talking about the IP addresses and Bigleaf's kind of end-to-end service, and you see where it says Bigleaf Gateway Cluster, really what that means is that we have our own equipment in major data centers and major peering centers around the country. And I'm going to show you a quick map of where those are today. So just showing our 8 in the United States and about to be 9 when we bring on Ashburn, Virginia in the next couple of months, but that'll be great. And then we have our 3 in Europe as well. So really what this means is we have our own backbone and network to be able to carry traffic directly to these cloud providers from your site. So this is a direct connection to Microsoft, Amazon, these major cloud providers that also peer in these facilities. So that was really the thought of us investing and building out our own networks, that we can have this end-to-end true reliable control over the public internet. And that's where we're issuing our IP addresses out of the closest gateway to wherever your site is. So really what that means is we're in the same facilities as these cloud providers, and that's what gives us that ability to have that end-to-end control on that last diagram. So this is just a zoomed in version of that, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. So just want to talk about the IP address piece real quick and what was being mentioned there. So when we talk about voice calls and applications and things like that going down a circuit, a lot of times when voice and video and those applications have problems is when a circuit has an issue and the traffic has to fail over, that IP address changes in that failover process, like Robert mentioned earlier. And that is what causes major issues with VPNs, voice calls. They'll go down, they'll drop, try to reestablish, a lot of times won't, and you have to call your provider. That's completely gone in this. Bigleaf is issuing a separate IP address from the carrier so that anytime a voice call is going down ISP1 and that call or that circuit degrades or gets cut in half, whatever happens, that call will seamlessly move over to ISP2 without missing a word on that phone call. So there are no policies or configurations to make this happen. This is part of our algorithms and our service to be able to detect circuit problems in real time, move a call or video session over to that other connection. And then we also talk about how, sending a circuit over or sending traffic over the best performing circuit in real time. So even though the primary circuit is primary, it could have a little bit of a latency issue that would affect a VoIP call. We will see that, move that VoIP call to the other circuit and keep it on there as long as it needs to avoid that latency issue that was happening on the primary circuit. So these types of things happening in the background in real time to where the applications are performing fine and you're not worrying about network problems bringing you down now, you can get an alert of issues that are happening, but your users aren't feeling that pain. And we monitor each circuit in the upload and download 10 times per second. So that's how we're seeing those types of issues that are happening. And I just realized I haven't been monitoring the chat box, but I'm sure y'all would have told me if there was something. So I did not look yet, but it's okay. Sorry.
We're good so far.
Cool. Okay. All right. And I want to talk about this too. So when I talked about artificial intelligence earlier a little bit and what we're doing, automating parts of the WAN, WAN part of the network. This is really where that becomes important because prioritization is huge for VoIP and these applications that are being used to ensure things are coming down that circuit in the right order. You don't want a large Microsoft patch update to take down your VoIP and Zoom calls that everybody's using every single day. So what we're able to do is automatically detect a traffic type and prioritize it accordingly for what we see as critical traffic like VoIP video and software applications over non-essential traffic. So even down to the home office user level, I use a Bigleaf router in my home office for this exact reason. So if someone else is in my house, starts to stream something, that's not going to degrade my Zoom and VoIP call. This automatically gets priority over that. So you can really, apply that to your business at your office where a lot of people are using applications at the same time, or even in a home office where it's more of, Netflix, YouTube, things like that are being streamed. So ensuring that VoIP and sensitive business applications have that priority within the network, and that happening over the public internet. So that's pretty cool. And Robert, so I was going to ask you too. So for these types of things in the past, have you guys, when it comes to firewalls and other QoS types of applications, that would be much more manual, right? Is that kind of
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's very hard to maintain because most of these firewalls without some really advanced logging analytics, you can't really identify the types of traffic and certainly don't do it in real time. You can set up some policies to try to specify certain types of protocols, which VoIP protocols or what have you, but not every application uses the same. Even when it comes to cloud applications, they're just changing. They don't always use a standard, I'll say, and so it hasn't been easy to get the level of performance that would be desired with just your standard small medium business firewall.
Yep. Understood. Yeah, and this prioritizing inbound and outbound too, because I know you mentioned that earlier, the in and out direction. So that bi-directional prioritization, automated QoS with quality of service QoS. So being able to ensure that application experience to and from its destination.
Yeah, I'd say on the inbound side, coming into the network, we've had no real ability to do that without several different other outside technologies to fail over, say DNS to different IP addresses. And that is way more difficult and generally not even worth the effort.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So we talked about security neutral. So meaning to us, we don't care who the security or firewall provider is. We are transparent to that on-site security device. So for any VPNs and things like that, those would still be run off of your firewalls. Our role for a VPN is really the same as those applications to ensure a failover experience if latency, packet loss, jitter, things like that get too bad for a VPN to handle. So we will not drop a VPN when it needs to move between different internet providers. Okay. So I talked about this a little bit, so just wanted to mention the visibility. So with the Intelice team, you're able to set alerts for your different locations and your different customer sites to be able to monitor how those circuits are performing. So you'll be able to see bandwidth utilization, latency, packet loss, how many times applications have had to fail over in a month, or different time constraints that you need to. But this is really important to be able to work with your partners on how your circuits are performing, kind of doing monthly summary reports that we send out and analyzing how much of that bandwidth you're using. So just a kind of X-ray vision into how the network is performing that really hasn't been there in the past. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that too. There's a quick snapshot of what some of those dashboard screens look like. And then, yeah, so I wanted to kind of bring it back home with this. So with Intelice, obviously, so can work with our support team anytime and you guys, but being able to help kind of cross-vendor troubleshooting, which I think is a big piece, to where our support team will actually stay on the phone with carriers and with the Intelice team to discuss your network and how things are going, but also troubleshoot a circuit problem that's happening with the carrier. So not requiring that you call the carrier by yourself and kind of fend for yourself on things that are happening, but working with our support team to help troubleshoot that problem, nail down exactly where the issue is. And we're 24/7 US based out of Portland, Oregon, where we're headquartered.
Yeah, to me, this is a really, really big advantage. I mean, over the years of supporting, customers and internet service issues or WAN issues, I don't know how many times I've had to literally convince an internet provider technician that, hey, I'm tracking the traffic, I'm identifying that it's failing here, check your upstream router, and ultimately to have that conversation for 30 minutes with them, only for them to agree that, oh yeah, it looks like we're having an upstream problem.
The finger pointing, it's always finger
yeah,
pointing.
and they'll sit there and check your equipment, reboot it, try all this, and we're like, no. And, and those brownouts you talk about, those are even more mysterious to try to troubleshoot when it comes to what the provider is willing to do.
From that end-to-end monitoring traffic, we really have more data than they even do on their own circuits. So it's kind of interesting when we get on the phone to see, how things are happening, and a carrier will almost immediately try to always say it's the cloud provider's fault or the VoIP provider's fault, things like that you hear on support calls all the time, where that can be shut down very quickly with our support team on there, telling them kind of exactly where the issue is and not asking where the issue is valuable. So. But I wanted to make sure I had it open for any questions, or Robert, if you thought maybe there was anything else I needed to make sure I hit on, but wanted to make sure it was making sense to everybody and kind of understanding, I probably used the word application 1,000 times in the last 35 minutes, but that's really the goal, is that kind of that cloud first SD-WAN user experience over the public internet, as more and more businesses are using cloud applications.
Yeah, I think it just as we're coming out of COVID at some point here, businesses are starting to have individuals come back to work, or even if they've had them there the whole time back in the offices, just the nature of what's happening with the utilization of these technologies is growing, right? And the adoption and growth of things like, Microsoft Team meetings or Zoom meetings, and everybody's seen it. And those are way more demanding on the internet services than anybody had before. And that's going to continue to grow, and to support them, more solutions like this to ensure that the delivery of those solutions is prioritized is necessary, just to utilize it. You don't want, like you said, download, somebody's watching YouTube or downloading a large file, and your VoIP call or your webinar or your meeting is interrupted and glitchy just because you've maxed out your bandwidth.
What's interesting, I was going to make one point, sorry to cut you off, is that in that example I gave in my home office, I use it over a single internet connection. So that's even more interesting that I don't have a secondary circuit here to aggregate together. I didn't really have the availability for it, but it really helped a lot of my issues, just prioritizing the critical applications over a single internet connection, really helping my issues. So interesting to see that application over a single circuit and how it's helped me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate the time, everyone. And I want to make sure I left it open just for a couple questions and obviously any sort of follow-ups with the Intelice team. I'm happy to do a abbreviated version of this anytime or answer any questions that come up later on too.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it. And you too, Robert. We do have the question, the chat feature in the application that people can add to if they have any questions. I'm looking at that right now. So one question that is coming up, just what is the first step in terms of getting an estimate for the solution, and how long is it expected for it to be implemented?
Yeah, Robert, you want me to do that, or you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I can take it. So the first step is for obviously requesting from Intelice an evaluation of their current setup and what a recommendation for the solution would be. Generally speaking, there is some equipment that needs to be procured, the Bigleaf Router specifically. And I mean, Ryan, you can speak to the shipping time on those, but once it's
week to a week and a half, usually about a week.
Okay, and so once that's received, that is provisioned in our headquarter office. We have a provisioning site here that we've set up with Bigleaf to provision the routers. To then they would be provisioned to utilize your internet service lines, and then there would just be a planning session to cut over your services and your IP addresses to implement that. And I would say that process doesn't take more than 2 weeks following the receipt of the router. And in reality, we can start the planning of that as soon as the engagement starts. So I'd say 2 to 3 weeks is probably a reasonable expectation once a solution is agreed to and procurement starts.
Yep. And just for education purposes, the pricing is based on your bandwidth of your circuit. So that's something you'd want to send to the Intelice team, is what your multiple circuit speeds are. If they don't already know that, your speeds of all your available connections would be helpful.
I think one other aspect here in the several engagements we've already had is we'd also like your internet service line agreements, so we can evaluate what your committed bandwidth is, how many IP address you're paying for monthly, and that is another point that we'll address and consult with you to let you know potential savings even on your current lines with the move to this solution.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Do we have any other questions? Please enter them in the chat.
I would recommend going to the website too and checking out some of that stuff. The resource library, I think, is really good on the website. So being able to see case studies and some of the applicable information from today is something I would mention as well.
And what's the website, Ryan?
Bigleaf.net.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Almost tricked me for a second. I was like, wait. I know that's what this website is.
Threw you a softball,
man. Yeah. The one question I wasn't ready for today. What's your website? Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Well, excellent. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through. As always, you guys have full access to our resources. Call our service desk, your account manager, reach out however possible. We'll get you in touch with the right resources. Really appreciate your time today, both to our attendees and our panelists today. Really appreciate the time and looking forward to implement this solution for you. So look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.